Hi everyone, this is Coral System here, and I'm doing episode 3 of DID in the Media. This episode is going to be about Criminal Minds, which is a series that has quite a few episodes, and even the most recent season had quite a few long-running episodes on dissociative identity disorder. Now they switched back and forth between calling it MPD and DID in many episodes, but I will be focusing on the one that pissed off the community the most. It's season 2. I don't have the exact episode down. It was a two-parter. And it's about a man named Tobias. Now, Tobias, there's a lot of stuff that's wrong with this episode. Tobias has 3 personalities: his abusive father, Charles, himself, and then Raphael, which is an archangel that kills sinners. This is full of the evil, murderous altar trope and the poor host who had no idea this is happening. You know, the famous DID trope. It did have a lot of inaccuracies, such as he had no alters previously. They even state this in the show canon, that he had no alters previously, and that he split randomly as an adult, but also he split after drug use. So 2 things. One, DID is developed in childhood. It doesn't just randomly appear as an adult. And 2, you cannot get labeled with DID unless you're sober for an amount of time and your alters are present before you're sober. So if you are struggling with sobriety, you have to wait until you're completely sober in order to get a diagnosis of DID, because drug use can mimic the signs of DID because they're mood-altering substances, which affect your personality. So that's extremely inaccurate to how DID works and is diagnosed. I did like that they touched on religious trauma and non-human alters. They did a pretty good job with describing non-human alters and really showing the effects that religious trauma can have on systems. I thought that was pretty accurate, at least to how my system works with religious trauma. Can play a huge part in developing angel alters, demon alters, alters who are extremely religious but also extremely afraid of religion. He claims that the guilt of killing his own father is what made him split, but he killed his father as an adult. You don't split, you split because of trauma. Now that is a trauma, but and if he had DID previously, that sure as heck can make him split and affect his system immensely. But since he didn't have a system beforehand and was an adult, it takes more than that to split. Now, he had an extensive, they made canon of him having an extensive history of religious trauma and child abuse, but he didn't show signs of DID back then. They're claiming, the profilers are claiming, that he randomly developed DID as an adult after killing his own father, which isn't really how it works. It'd be more likely that he developed it in childhood after the abuse from his father, but it didn't. I'm reading. Oh yes, this is the drugs that he was using throughout the show and throughout him being claimed to have DID was Dilaudid cut with psychedelics, which if you know anything about psychedelics, and if you know anything about Dilaudid, which is a hospital grade, I believe, opiate. It's a hospital grade opiate, and then he cut it with psychedelics. That sure as hell can give you personality issues when you're high. So it's not really a great representation of DID when the supposed subject of DID is high off their ass the entire time. So, that is also not a good thing. Also, disclaimer, don't ever do that. Especially don't ever do that if you have DID, because that's a horrible idea. It's an extremely addictive substance, Dilaudid is, and it will affect you immensely. It affects memory issues, causes migraines, can cause seizures, a whole mess of shit. Don't ever do that. So it's not a great representation of DID in the slightest. I'm glad they touched on the religious trauma. If you have religious trauma, I'd tread lightly watching it, but it does really show the effects that religious trauma can have on you. You can see the battle he's having with himself and with his father about the trauma. So in that sense, it is sort of accurate without the not everyone who goes through religious trauma ends up being a serial killer kind of way. But some of it does have a little bit of accuracies, but in the area of DID is completely inaccurate, and a lot of systems have been really pissed off at Criminal Minds for doing it this way, because as people with DID, first of all, the evil trope is getting kind of old. It shouldn't be there with a stigmatizing mental illness that people already debate its existence for God knows what reasons. And there's so many other tropes that you can use without carrying mental illness into it. And Criminal Minds has a history of doing this. They give inaccurate representations of borderline personality disorder and claim that certain killers on the show have borderline personality disorder when there is no way they meet the criteria, and they give inaccurate readings of the criteria. They have used schizophrenics demonized constantly in the show. They give extremely stigmatizing representations and talks about antisocial personality disorder. Especially, they're not even referring it to that. They're calling them sociopaths and psychopaths, which is an extremely outdated term, which is inaccurate for antisocial personality disorder. It's not broken up into those two segments anymore. It's just called antisocial because they realize that it's more of a spectrum than just black and white. They have given accurate descriptions of OCD. That's about it. They're better with the physical illnesses than the mental illness, but it's a show that extremely gives a lot of stigmatization to mental illnesses. So I would strongly recommend not trusting anything that Criminal Minds says about it. They do give good statistics. Like, statistics they give are accurate, but the descriptions they use are iffy. So that concludes the third episode of DID in the Media. Like always, if you have any suggestions for things you want to see in the future, or any pieces of media you would like me to review as someone with DID, leave it in the description below, and I'd be happy to search for it and give it a look. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later.